Howdy folks, Craig Lavati here with the Houston Museum of Natural Science and the Beyond Bones Zoomcast. Today we're talking to Doreen Stoller and Kyle Wolf from the Hermann Park Conservancy. Yes, that beautiful, amazing park the museum is lucky to be neighbors with. Howdy folks, Craig Lavati here with the Houston Museum of Natural Science, and this is, of course, the Beyond Bones Zoomcast. I am joined by my co-host, my very, very smart and purple co-host, Kat Havens.
Hi, how are you doing, Craig?
I am great. This is the official day, the first day of fall in Houston.
The equinox.
It's 85 degrees outside, and we're wearing sweatpants and drinking lattes outside and just basking in this fall weather. Speaking of basking in the amazing weather and just amazing outdoor things in Houston, today's episode, we are talking to Doreen Stoller, the president of the Hermann Park Conservancy, and Kyle Wolf, the volunteer coordinator cat wrangler for the Hermann Park Conservancy. As you guys know, Hermann Park is it's our beautiful, beautiful next door neighbors at the museum. I like to say that no trip to the park or the museum or the other, it's a package deal. You have to go see us. You have to go see them. You can't really stop and not go visit Hermann Park. Doreen and Kyle, thank you.
Hey guys.
Happy to be here. And it is a beautiful day in Hermann Park. You're right, boy, it gets a little bit chilly and we're all excited to be outside again.
So is this like y'all's, they call it Chamber of Commerce weather, but is this like y'all's, is this Hermann Park weather right now? This is perfect.
It is. The fall is really one of the most popular times in the park. The spring to March, April, May. Whenever my family up north starts teasing me about Houston in the summertime, I'm like, oh, but wait, because we have such glorious weather for most of the year.
I'm swimming in December while you are bundled up.
I like to say, too, that people get sent to the park, I know Houston First, I think they're really good about, they send all of the people here to town to visit during from October till March, when the weather's really good, and they get fooled that they don't realize that if you come any other time, you're going to be basically you're air frying outside. Right. So it's really fun that right now we're having this really great weather. Who knows? It'll probably be 100 degrees in 1 week, but for now we're going to enjoy it. So Hermann Park is one of my favorite places in town, and that's not just because it's right next door to my job. I've always loved Hermann Park. Like a lot of Houstonians, I'm sure Johnny's the silent partner today. I'm sure we all remember rolling down that hill.
Oh yeah,
Hermann Park,
the only hill in Houston, or perhaps this area altogether.
Well, my memory is rolling down that hill and the reflection pool being a big mud pit at the bottom.
Yes.
And the sound my sneakers would make as they, sort of sucking through the mud.
I think you and I are around the same age, Doreen. I remember that too very well.
Yeah.
Now the reflection pool is a really big draw there. Obviously, the statue of our buddy Sam Houston's right there. It sort of creates this really great, we use the term epic too much, but a really epic Houston scene. Kyle, could you talk to that at all? I mean, that's one of those things I'm sure that you love seeing when you go out there.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, the reflection pool is just absolutely gorgeous. And the way that the architect was able to create the point of perspective and kind of connecting where you guys are at HMNS and then all the way through the reflection pool across the lake and to the zoo. I'm sure that Doreen has some wonderful stories too about how that process came about and what the Conservancy was able to do to contribute to that and make it the beautiful place that it is today.
Yeah, if you could sort of walk us through the little Cliff's Notes, I guess, of the history of the park, if you can, from the beginning to now.
Yeah, and here in Houston, we always joke that we don't have much city planning, but back in the early 1900s, that was not the case. We actually had a planner who took a look at Houston. This will sound familiar. He said, honor these wonderful bayous, make them parks, and Mr. Hermann's family owned all of this pine forest down here. And so he suggested turning this into Pines Park. And so the mayor made George Hermann one of the first park commissioners. And sure enough, the strategy worked. He made a bequest of the parkland to the city when he passed away in 1914. So the next planner, George Kessler, comes on the scene. And any of you who've read The Devil in the White City about the Chicago World's Fair and the murders that happened there, but you got a sense of what that World's Fair meant in terms of people thinking that public spaces needed to be ennobling and that all of us, no matter where we came from, had a right to be in these public spaces that were so grand. So George Kessler was from Kansas City, Missouri. He very much wanted to bring the City Beautiful movement to Houston. If you stand by Sam Houston and look north between the high rises, you can see Montrose is the main axis that extends through the reflection pool. And the main axis of Rice actually meets up right at the Sam Houston statue. But flash forward 60 or 70 years when Houston became about cars and the carriage trails in the path were paved over. There was head-in parking all around that Sam Houston statue, and the reflection pool, because it never had a hard edge, was a big mud pit. So we had a design competition, had 114 entries from around the world, and this was the winning entry, is what you see out in the park today.
And it
I love it so much. Yeah, it's so beautiful.
Kat was saying that it does sort of remind you of Washington, D.C. in a way.
Yes, and I've actually friendly with the woman who ran the Conservancy for the Central Mall, who came here to try to understand how we use the crushed granite gravel under the trees because where people are congregating on grass, it tends to wear out. So they learned a few lessons from us too, but that was all very much out of that, ennobling public space that came from the City Beautiful movement.
And now, speaking of it being as a public space, back when I did TV a lot, I would always go out to Hermann Park, on a Saturday or a Sunday afternoon to do man on the street interviews, because I always knew I was going to get an amazing just grab bag of humanity out there. And I will say that's the one thing, is it's almost like the park is just a magnet for all walks of life at any time of day, pretty much.
It really is. We were happy that some students from Rice University worked with us on a user survey. They spent a month of October out here a few years ago, and people really do come from every zip code. And if you come to something like our Kite Festival, you see everybody. There's a saying that if you want to build a common bond, unite doing something ridiculous. Try to get a kite off the ground. Maybe that you.
When is the Kite Festival?
It's the last Sunday in March, and it's free.
Okay.
And we don't, all the activities are kid focused. So it feels like this is the town's picnic, and everybody's invited. And sure enough, everybody is there. It is
super multicultural
park for me.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and it's a popular, and Kat can talk to this as well, but it's a popular photo shoot area too. I mean, you'll have quinceañera photos there, you'll have engagement photos, you have wedding photos, you have prom photos, and you even have graduation photos too.
Yep, that's where we did my daughter's graduation photos, and they're absolutely awesome. They couldn't have come out better. And I'm telling you, of course, my daughter's beautiful, but it's the background, I think, that makes them so special. And I'll have to share those with you guys afterwards, but they're pretty awesome.
We had a temporary art exhibition in the park sponsored by the Houston Art Alliance of Ai Weiwei's Circle of Animal Zodiac heads. So the Chinese zodiac animals, they were all along the lake edge, and, big, tall, they were up on a pedestal. And there was a little sign there. So if you weren't familiar with what your Chinese zodiac sign was, you could figure out based on your birth year. And Dan and I, my husband and I, were sitting there the day it opened, and this girl in her quinceañera, princess attire with a zebra striped bodice and a purple skirt and her hair all done up with her tiara. She finds her Chinese zodiac head to have her quinceañera portrait taken.
That's awesome.
And I thought, oh yes,
that is
so Houston.
What we love about Hermann Park.
That's Kat, you're right. That is like the only way that could get more Houston is if, like, I don't know, Jose Altuve like walked through the frame,
right, or she was eating barbecue. But
yeah,
Exactly.
I can't even imagine like how you would make that even more Houston. It's like turning it up to 11. That's Houston up to 11. It's the park does have that magic to it, and I know that obviously, you know, the cool part about the park is that since it's next to the medical center, it's next to the museum district. It's a confluence of all these different walks of life. I remember when I would go visit the park, or even these days when I go visit the park, you have a lot of people that are coming just to get out of the hospital. You know, like they're getting there to get, you know, exercise,
some fresh air,
sunshine. A lot of people go to the museum for that as well. We have this just a perfect little. How many acres is the park actually?
It's 445, including the zoo and including the golf course, and actually technically including y'all. You're not our next.
We're part of that.
You're inside Hermann Park. So.
400 acres. That I guess because it seems like there's probably a lot of spots in Hermann Park that a lot of people don't go to, or they don't know that it's actually still the park.
Yeah, Kyle might want to talk a little bit about Bayou Parkland, the secret eastern wilderness part of the park.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there is actually an 80-acre tract that is on the other side of Brays Bayou, which in between Brays Bayou and Alameda. And a lot of people don't realize that that is part of Hermann Park. And one of the reasons, I guess, is because it is primarily accessible from the main part of Hermann Park through the Bill Coates pedestrian bridge, or you actually have to go to parking lot P as in Paul, that is right off of Alameda in order to access it. But Bayou Parkland it's a really beautiful place. It is more of a wild area, I guess you could say, for Hermann Park. It consists of three main areas. There's one that is we refer to commonly as the urban forest. There's some beautiful trails that go throughout the forest that I highly recommend folks going and checking out, especially if you want to experience kind of the new fad of forest bathing, is what they say, where you go. Yeah, if you guys
I don't even know what that is. I don't know what that is.
So I'm forest bathing. No, so you don't. No removal of clothing is involved.
Please, no, please.
So we're good there.
Keep your clothes on.
But it's where you go and just experience the sounds, the smells, the whole experience of walking through the forest. And you don't realize you're inside the loop whenever you take a walk through this forest that seems so primitive.
I'm looking at a map now. I guess I have never really looked at a map of Hermann Park, but I mean, if you guys are out there. I mean, yeah, you said that, okay, it bumps up to Alameda, and then you have all along McGregor there, and you have like hidden little ponds and stuff too, I guess, that a lot of people don't. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's actually another one of the areas too, is that there's a series of education ponds. There's actually 10 of them there now that were originally installed by volunteers back in the early 2000s. They came out and dug up the ponds and put in liners and everything to use as an outdoor education classroom where environmental educators would actually come here to learn how to teach environmental science to their students. So they would do macro and microfauna collection. They would do you learn about what type of water quality is there, learn about the native and invasive plants that were growing out in the prairie areas, which is the third area that I would refer to. And the prairie area is actually a project that was done, a larger project called Blazing Star. And it was done in coordination with the Houston Zoo, the Parks and Recreations Department, Native Plant Society, Hermann Park Conservancy. Several folks were involved in that project where there are a lot of native plants that were actually salvaged and rescued from areas within Houston and Harris County that were about to undergo further development. And so they were relocated here to this site to showcase what your typical or what Houston would have looked like prior to it becoming the huge metro place that it is today. And so whenever I take people out there on tours and stuff and explain this, I always get just, wide-eyed folks. They're amazed that, so this is what Houston really looked like. And, we're actually part of a larger ecoregion called the Gulf Coast Marsh and Prairie. Yep. And so here it is, a perfect example of what you would see at a Gulf Coast Marsh and Prairie. A lot of the native plants are, huge for providing, they're a host plant, which is a plant that, some insect larvae, that's the only plant that they'll eat. And so insect larvae will feed off of that. And another key thing about Hermann Park is that we sit in right in the middle of what's called the Migratory Flyway. And so here we are, I think Bird Week was either this week or last week, but there's a huge, the fall and spring migration that comes through. I've had, volunteers refer to this pocket prairie as the Buc-ee's of for the birds.
Everybody stops to go to the bathroom.
The prairie, it provides, this awesome resource for all of the insect larvae that are growing on it. The birds come in, they eat those, and they fuel up before they book it across the Gulf of Mexico to go back for the winter. And it's really great.
My brother's wife, or my sister-in-law, I guess, took pictures of 2 different bald eagles that were in the park. And I mean, for weeks they were there. Yes. It wasn't just like they were just there for one day. I mean, something was happening. Do you know about that? Or
absolutely. So we don't have that we're aware of in any ways, and I'm sure we would have found it by now, of a nesting location of the bald eagles over there. Mm-hmm. However, the Brays Bayou is full of fish, and that is a common hunting ground for the bald eagle and other birds of prey that we have that visit the park too. So that's a huge resource for these wonderful creatures that you wouldn't think would be here in the middle of the city.
And I've found some birds of prey leftovers around the museum before, and it was a little shocking. I was like, what is that? It's like, has there been something bad happened? And they're like, no, there's like some raptors around here. So that was fascinating because it seems so busy for that, but they really still come here. It's really cool.
I remember one time, I think we walked out the front door of the museum, like over there, kind of like between I guess where the front door would be, and then the planetarium. Yeah. We have some trees over there. And I remember one day we walked out there, and it wasn't a bald eagle, but it was some sort of raptor thing. And I was just, we were watching
not a dinosaur.
It was just being, not a dinosaur. It was just being very, just sitting there, looking all majestic. And I saw its claws and its beak, and then it decided to fly towards me. And I remember kind of yelping a little bit because I was not wearing a hat that day, and I didn't know what this to be.
Attracted to the shine on your head.
I didn't know if it was going to be like, hey, there's an egg, let's get what's inside it. But that's true. I never realized that is a very trafficked area for wildlife. So I guess obviously you have squirrels there. I've seen tons of squirrels, raccoons. What other?
Lots of rabbits living in the Centennial Gardens.
Yeah, I've seen them.
Oh, yeah.
Dismay.
And being that raptors or birds are actually theropod dinosaurs, really. So you can go see the living dinosaurs in the Hermann Park, and then come over to the museum
to see the dinosaurs. They're about to come back. The cormorants overwinter in McGovern Lake. And when we double the size of the lake, we put in 2 islands for migratory birds that people can't get out to. And there's a big dead tree in one of them. And the cormorants who, like to dry their feathers off between diving for food will be up there in the early morning mist with their wings spread. And you truly see the straight line to the dinosaurs.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And it is there. That is awesome.
Do you guys have any sort of kind of like friendly rivalry with the other parks in the city? Like, do you guys get together with like the Buffalo Bayou people and Discovery Green people and kind of like share stories and notes and stuff?
Oh, absolutely. Not a rivalry. I put the emphasis on the friendly rather than the rivalry, just because, we're all trying to figure it out. In a perfect world, Houston's tax base would be so robust that all the public spaces would be cared for with public funds. But the Hermann Park Conservancy was one of the earliest in trying to figure out how the public-private partnership methodology worked with Discovery Green. That really accelerated a lot of private investment in the park. But now the conservancies are also needing to take on bigger roles in maintaining the park, hence Kyle's very critical volunteer program, because the city just doesn't have the resources to take care of everything, and it would be irresponsible for us to keep planning ever more fabulous improvements and not helping with the stewardship. So I mean, we are on the phone with each other all the time for questions large and small.
So how can people listening to this or watching this rather, how can they help the park?
Well, one way is obviously to start volunteering. I mean, that's, every little bit helps. I always explain to volunteers that no matter if we are weeding, if we're raking, every single task that you're doing is a meaningful task and is going toward, chiseling away at this 445 acres worth of work that has to be completed every day. And so you can go to our website actually at hermannpark.org and then /volunteer. And there's actually a online volunteer request form there for if you have a group that wants to come out and volunteer with this. We work with groups of all sizes. If you just as an individual want to come out on your own, we have multiple programs for that. And even we have families that'll come, that'll bring, like their 2-year-old to come and start raking pine straw and teaching them work ethics and things like that.
They don't know they're working. They just think they're playing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Pick up all the pine cones you can.
Yeah, okay. And the college alumni groups or, faith-based groups or corporate teams that come out. What's so nice is if you have a group and whatever it is you're doing, by the end of the 2.5 hours, having a team of people working on it, you're going to see a difference when you're done. And so it's actually pretty fun to be outside together and to see the impact that you have.
Do you allow scout groups and younger people groups? Is that a possibility for...
Yes. And
Absolutely.
Diane Kerr, our conservation director, every summer leads a job shadow program for youngish teenagers who, so it's what it says. They shadow her. They learn about conservation. She has them do lots of stuff. Some of them are very muddy.
I bet.
Stuff out. But sometimes she'll have kids that have never seen a turtle in the wild. And somehow it never really crossed their consciousness that turtles really do come from the outdoors.
Yeah. I mean, if you've never seen that in real life, that actually stands to reason, doesn't it? That's pretty amazing.
That's the beautiful part too about the park is that it's, and to Kyle's point, like it's nestled inside the loop. And a lot of people who haven't been to Houston, they don't realize how green Houston actually can be, even in some of the quote most developed areas. And thankfully, Hermann Park has maintained that boundary, like you said, the 400 acres, that it's sort of enclosed and it's this cool little jewel inside everything else.
Yeah, there's a trail that if people haven't explored it yet, I would recommend. It's a Greenway trail that connects from the back of one of the parking lots that's in front of the zoo, and it cuts right through the middle of the golf course and connects to these trails that will then lead you to the underpass and the bridge to the Alameda side of the park. But as you're walking through that golf course, we put steel arbors up where statistically you might get clunked on the head by a golf ball, so you don't have to worry about that. But they feel like park structures, and it's so quiet. And the medical center has 100,000 employees every day, let alone all the patients coming in and out. Downtown is just to the other side, and here you are in the middle of all this, just completely isolated.
Is that accessible by a bike or is that walking?
Bike and foot? Yes. If you're doing the 2-mile loop around the golf course, it cuts right through the middle, and you can either bike it or walk it.
Yeah, we had on the B-Cycle folks a few weeks ago, and we mentioned the park a little bit. I think, we mentioned the park as one of the destinations, and I think you guys even have a few B-Cycle kiosks over there too.
Yes, I think the second most used B-Cycle kiosk is the one right by the lake.
Really? That's so cool.
And that lake, that's McGovern Lake we're talking about, right?
Yes.
Okay. And that's a man-made lake?
Yeah, yes, it was the Grand Basin when it was first put in the park as part of Kessler's master plan. And if you think about walking into the zoo, there's that beautiful little reflection pool there. The zoo did not have a fence originally. So you had the Sam Houston, the reflection pool, the Grand Basin, and then another small reflection pool in the zoo all lined up.
Making me want to look at maps now about this.
When did the fence go up around the zoo?
Oh,
you know? Sorry, I didn't mean to stump you.
I'm sure that must have been in the 40s or 50s.
Okay, so early on.
There are beautiful historic photos of, the historic bird building, and you know, that just sort of, they were just kind of sitting out in the park. And I don't know whether the story is real or apocryphal, that one of the early animals in the zoo was a buffalo named Earl, who became the first taxidermied animal in the collection of the museum.
That was my next thing too, is that when I was the Chronicle, I used to write about one of the first zookeepers, Hans, was crazy story. Like I should write a screenplay about it one day and make $1 million, but he was one of the first zookeepers at the zoo, and he was kind of like a rough and tumble Eastern European guy.
Yes.
Didn't meet a very
definitely right about him.
Didn't meet a very noble end, obviously. He was, he was a rougher guy, but whenever I read about or I learn about old school zoo stuff, because HMNS, when we were just the science museum, we were a part of the zoo.
Yeah.
And so there's this really cool lineage and history and stuff that, you even talk about the zoo not having fences, which to most people now, that's just like, that's insane.
It was a different time.
Yeah.
I didn't know what happened to Hans, Craig. You're like leaving me hanging, or is that
that's another story for another day.
Okay. That's for the book. I'll leave it.
That is,
and how things change. And even when we, the Conservancy has spent 30 years working on master plan improvements for the park. Our first master plan, we actually executed against for 20 years. If you can imagine, most people will do a plan, it will sit in a drawer, but, we picked it off for 20 years. And now we've had a refresh of the plan, working with Michael von Valkenburg and Associates for the next 20 years. And you just learn so much. The first phase, it was restoring some of this historic infrastructure, like the reflection pool, putting the beautiful limestone around it. But the project that we're working on right now, called the Commons, is 26 acres from the corner of Fannin and Cambridge, all the way along Fannin to the back of the Japanese garden, and then all the way to the front of the zoo, so along the lake edge. And most of that right now is mown turf, grass, like in your front yard, which has almost no environmental benefit at all, because it's not providing food for the birds. They don't have very deep roots, so it's not helping the groundwater. So we're designing one of the most amazing imaginative play landscapes, which I'll talk about in a minute. But what I'm even more exciting about is we're going to have acres and acres of conversion of this mown turf to these wonderful native habitats and understory plants to help the many birds.
Pollinators too, and everything.
And Kyle, why don't you tell them a little bit about your farming that you've been doing
here
in the middle of Houston?
And so I like to joke because I've been in Houston a little over 3 years now, and I'm originally from Northeast Texas, and I had grandparents that were out on the farm in southeastern Oklahoma, and I'm a country boy at heart, right? And so here I am in Houston and working at the Conservancy and working on this project. And we literally planted 7 acres of radishes. And this is just so crazy. It's like, all right, now I'm at the city farming radishes, but utilizing a regenerative agricultural technique. And so what's really cool is that if you guys are familiar with daikon radish, I mean, that's, very common in like Asian cuisine and stuff. And it's huge. I mean, like the radish can be almost as large as my arm. And when you look at the 7 acres that we planted these radishes in, it's really incredible because, this is acreage that has been used and walked on as parkland for over 100 years now. And if anyone has ever tried to dig a hole in Houston soil, you realize there's not really a whole lot of soil there. It's a lot of clay, right?
Yeah.
And so,
or gumbo, I guess they call it.
Yeah, gumbo, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, all these food references, gumbo and stuff to it. But the soil is just, it's so compacted and so hard to expect anything to really, grow really well there without first doing some prep work. Now, the last thing that we would have wanted to do was go through like your traditional agricultural techniques of just, tilling everything up. Because then what would happen is that, invasive vegetation seeds would show up and start sprouting. You would just, it would be a disaster as far as like, seeds coming up that we didn't want to have there. So by utilizing the daikon radish, those radishes, because they're so large, actually were able to penetrate that soil, penetrate the clay, and expand it. And then when we got our massive freeze back in February, that freeze, killed them off, which was exactly what we were expecting and hoping was going to happen. And whenever the radishes died and decomposed, they left little divots all throughout the 7 acres. And then you have like more biomass, those tap roots were able to draw nutrients closer to the surface, and it's adding to the biological aspects of the soil. After the radishes, we went through and planted a type of rye, cereal ryegrass on it too. And, thankfully, we had a lot of locals that we would find where people were like taking our daikons and using them in their own cooking and stuff like that. We're like, stop.
No urban harvesting in here inside the park.
Exactly. No harvesting here. But then when we had the ryegrass, I joked about too, how, I think people just don't realize that, this is the same thing you would use to make whiskey, or it would all be gone too.
No moonshine. Kyle has made, we have a volunteer beekeeper. We have bees in the Centennial Gardens, and she jars up our honey that Kyle sometimes gives out to his volunteers. And Kyle's made beautyberry jelly, but so far he has not made moonshine in Hermann Park.
That's another thing we didn't even touch on yet, is the Centennial Gardens, which is just another amazing. I always say that the museum's parking garage has one of the most beautiful views in the world of the park.
It does.
Because if you go to the top level, you see everything, and then you're almost at level with. What's the little thing there so I've spent a lot of time in the park over there, but the mount.
Yes, the mount. Yeah, and that was interesting. We were working on that design for a number of years and started to launch our fundraising right in 2008, 2009, which, if you think back, was like exactly the wrong time to launch a campaign with the Depression. So we stopped for a couple of years. And where the mount was supposed to be a wildflower meadow. So you would come in and have this nice formal lawn and then a big wildflower meadow at the end of it. But in the 2 years while we were on pause, our landscape architect, Doug Hare, his mind kept reeling, and he comes to Houston for the kickoff meeting. And this is supposed to be the dotting the I's and crossing the T's kind of meeting. And he reveals this mount because he thinks we need a big focal point when you come in. And it's based off of Renaissance garden types. So it's not Mayan or, meant to be anything like that. Which is
also based off Babylonian, the Renaissance stuff, the hanging, hanging gardens of Babylon.
Right. So he was trying to convince us that it had an august garden design history, so that we wouldn't just immediately say, "What, are you crazy?"
I love it.
And I tell you what, I give a lot of golf cart tours, and the architect for the garden, Peter Bolin, who was 75 when he came to work with us, and he just won the gold medal from the American Institute of Architects. And we spent all of our money on the gardens and very little on the actual architecture. And so when Peter came to interview for the job, we were like, why are you world famous architect here? Because your fee is not even going to be worth, getting out of bed for. And Peter said, I'm at the point in my career where I can do what I want, and the Centennial is important to Houston, and I want to be part of it. And he had designed the glass Apple store on Fifth Avenue, and Steve Jobs' house, and Bill Gates' house. So, he is like
a passion project here.
150 times our budget.
I had no clue that he did that as well.
he said you want to have the moment of leaving the world of the parking lot and entering the garden be like going through a portal. So if you're coming not from the museum side, but from the parking lot side, you don't notice this, but the sort of shiny brushed stainless steel walls are getting wider and the roof is lifting up. So as you walk through, the view of the gardens and the mount is literally expanding around you as you come through. And then Doug used forced perspective on the lawn, so it gets narrower as it gets close to the mount, another Renaissance technique.
Yeah, it is.
So the lawn looks a lot longer, but it's funny because when you're on top of the mount, you have the opposite effect where the building suddenly seems like it's a lot closer to you than it was. But
I remember when it first opened, I did a TV segment where we climbed the mount, and I remember acting like it was like this highest peak in Houston. You probably remember seeing it, and like halfway up, I'm like, I need oxygen. And I'm like
climbing. That's
I'm passing out, and then all of a sudden you see like a 5-year-old behind me just zooming right past.
By you. The opening day, I don't know if you saw it, we had a marching band and with the big white sousaphones and stuff, and they marched to it and then up around it, so you got to watch them curling around.
Dizzy, out of breath, playing their instruments. That's awesome though.
Yeah, Lori Olin, our first master planner, loved Hermann Park, and he's from Philadelphia and grew up in Alaska, and so he kept saying Houston has a bad case of the flats. And so we try to do what we can. In fact, our next project, this Commons, the play garden I was talking about, we're going to build another 12-foot tall landform over 3 acres. And so it's not a playground. It is truly a garden. It is intensely planted with new trees and new understory plants. And the parents and grandparents can sit high and watch the kids play in these big bowls that are garden rooms. And for people my age, another Hermann Park memory is the rocket ship slide. And we are bringing back a rocket ship slide, but this one will be 40 feet tall. And it has a catenary leading to it. So child in a wheelchair can get out to it, and there's a
accessible
to loop down. So we'll have a space adventure area for the 5 to 12-year-olds. For the 2 to 5-year-olds, we have a snake den with a big wooden snake and a Houston toad that, again, are large enough so a child in a wheelchair can get inside.
That's cool.
And have a little den within the den, so children on the spectrum who need to feel a little protected
safe
while they're watching what's going on have a place to sit. And we've got musical instruments and lots of plants of different scents, and our water play area will kind of mimic the bayous, going down to wet sand play at the bottom. So lots of different experiences for kids coming soon to Hermann Park.
That's amazing. I want to come play.
I know we always joke that we want to have staff day to play before we open to the public. So
I want some wet sand time. So I'm not knocking children out of the way.
Speaking of kids stuff, we didn't even bring it up yet, but the Hermann Park train.
Yes,
Johnny, obviously our producer, Johnny, he's a big fan of the train and trains in general. And we're excited to learn more about the train. I think, Johnny, you're working on a video, I believe, about the train, right? Tell us about the train.
Yeah, the train has been in the park almost 60 years now. For a long time, it was run by a concessionaire, by a family. You may remember the tunnel with the funny puppets that were in it. And they were a lovely family and created lots of memories for kids in the park. But at some point, again, when the Conservancy was needing to help take care of the park more, the city transferred that concessions agreement to us, because all of the profits then go back into the park. And so at the time we took over is when we widened the tracks to get bigger cars. So again, child in a wheelchair can get on the trains now. We also added the 3 little stops in the park. So one right across the street from you, Museum of Natural Science, one at the Sunset Light Rail Station and one closer to the Houston Zoo Memorial Hermann Station. And the notion is if people would take light rail to the park on busy days, they can get off the light rail, get on the little train, get off at the zoo, visit y'all, whatever they want to do. But it was a little, not only fun, but a little circulator. And there, Johnny, I'm going to tell you, we have a number of train drivers who are train aficionados who work with us for a few hours on the weekend.
Johnny, go drive the train.
Yes, I was going to say,
I'm trying.
Even just for your birthday, maybe your colleague step in for Engineer for the Day. That's another program where it was meant to be for kids, but you'd be surprised how many grown-ups we have come out.
I'll use my 11th-month-old as collateral.
There you go.
There you go.
Yeah, I think that more people would use mass transit in Houston if they all looked like the Hermann Park train. if everything looked like that, I think or if there was like cute puppets in the middle of it, people would love that. They would use that more often.
And we do want people to come to the park all different ways. I live in the Montrose. I bike to work a lot. We're trying to, with a new transportation bill, hopefully we'll be able to apply for some alternative transportation funding to build a true bike commuter spine, north, south, and east, west through the park, connecting the Ion and TMC and Rice and the Third Ward and the Bayou Greenway trails. So, trying to that was one thing we learned in the master planning process when we had all the public input, this refresh a couple of years ago. I kept thinking, parking. Every comment is going to be about parking. But of the mobility comments, 50% of them were really about making it easier to walk to the park, make it easier to take transit, make it easier to bike. So Houston, we're not there yet, but we are.
That makes my heart happy.
Move in that direction. So.
Yeah, because when the park does well, I mean, it's a big symbiotic relationship between the museum and the zoo and you guys and even the medical center, and being right there next to the Texas Children's Hospital, bless them, everything they do there. And it's so close that it's right there too. So that's just the perfect,
and you've seen with the Centennial Gardens being so close to HCA, used to be the Park Plaza Hospital on the north side of the park, lots of employees and patient families spending time there. And another aspect of the Commons project, the 6 acres right at the corner of Fannin and Cambridge, directly across the street from Memorial Hermann, will be a 6-acre garden full of native plants with big decks under the live oaks. So lots of shade, calming area. So all those frontline healthcare workers that have just seen unimaginable
been overwrought
last year could just come across the street, take a deep breath, and even if they only have 6 minutes, at least they'll have 6 minutes to recharge. So
how did you guys do with COVID? Did you guys get a lot busier? Did you guys notice?
The park certainly got a lot busier, and I'm here to thank every single member of the Conservancy team because we did not close a day. The office team came. We have a small office. We're spread out, but we learned to put a piece of paper on the filing cabinet and back away and kept each other safe, and our gardeners and maintenance people and the train drivers. There was a period where the train was shut down, but all through COVID, we saw families with little kids suddenly when schools closed come out and bring a blanket and spend the day. And you could tell the parents were having, a futile attempt to try to have lessons outside. I think they were successful with recess. I'm not sure about the rest, but there were just no safe places to be as a family. And so there were lots of people finding refuge in the park during that.
While we're talking, I'm just staring at the map of the park and I'm still in awe of how big. I always knew it was big, but I just didn't realize how big this was too. So that's just,
Craig, anytime you are welcome to come for Doreen's famous golf cart tour. And
I want a golf cart tour.
You are welcome to.
Craig gets all the tours.
Can I bring my own golf cart? Because I signed up for a raffle not too long ago, and the top prize is a golf cart. So if I get the golf cart, maybe we'll go in a golf cart race.
That's hysterical.
Or you could donate it to the nature. You could donate it to the park.
We'll put a plaque on it. And anytime you want to drive it, you're welcome to.
The Craig cart. The Craig cart. Yeah.
There you go.
That's another thing too. People have always asked if the park would ever do like music festivals and stuff. Because I know obviously you have Miller Outdoor Theater, and I have friends over there that help program that and everything. It seems like it would be a no-brainer, but I'm sure that you always also are looking at the longevity of the park, and you don't want to, have it be trampled over and stuff like that.
Yes, and this mayor's office of special events and the parks department stopped doing big festivals in the park because of that.
Got it.
Just being trampled. But then we are also a shared resource. And,
right.
If suddenly we had a big music festival and nobody could visit the zoo or visit your museum because
it would be bad.
Square inch of parking in the park by festival goers, that would not make us super popular.
We don't want Lollapalooza in the park.
Sorry, I was about to actually say that. Yeah, no Lollapalooza in Houston, folks.
Ambulances would not be able to get through. It would be like logistical.
Because Summerfest was crazy enough at Eleanor Tinsley's. So, I mean,
that's right. Oh my gosh, yes. I don't want her ghost to haunt me. We do make an exception for the Japan Festival.
Yes.
We work with Josh, the Japan American Society of Houston, on that, and they're really the producer. The festival does raise funds for the Japanese garden, and it is, very much a cultural exchange. And for people who haven't visited the Japanese garden, I encourage all of you to go discover it. We have a tremendous friendship with the Japanese community here. They formed a committee 16 years ago that has met once a month to help us make sure the garden stays Japanese. They raise money to bring a team from Japan every year. Mr. Iwasaki and his son have been here 13 years now. They've been the last year and a half because of COVID, but they train us how to trim the black pines and shape the bushes and all of those things. And it's just been a remarkable friendship. And the garden is all the better because of it. Does
the park have actual hours? I've always wanted to know that.
Yes, it does. Okay. Technically from sun up to 11 o'clock at night. Okay. So after 11, it is not legal to be in the park. And every so often, our friends from HPD will make a round and make sure.
Round them up.
Can you rent anything inside the park? Like, can you go in there and a lot of people ask about birthdays and stuff too. I've heard people ask about that.
Yeah. Yes. Several options there. We have a little volunteer center that Kyle has graciously on certain Saturdays turned it over to Ron, our visitor services group. So there are little birthday parties there right by the train. It includes a train ride. There are picnic pavilions over by the playground, and we will be restoring the large pavilion, replacing the smaller ones as part of our project. If it's a bigger party, there's the main room in the Cherry Flores Pavilion in the Centennial Gardens, as well as the Celebration Garden. During COVID, we had lots of weddings where people had planned a big church wedding or a wedding inside someplace, and they still wanted to get married and brought 10 friends and stood out in the Centennial Gardens even during the heat of COVID. So that was lovely. And then we just restored the historic clubhouse, which was built in 1935 in kind of a Santa Barbara style. Just a beautiful, beautiful building. So,
if you go there during the park in the summer at a good time and you have all the grills going, it smells really good too, because you guys have those grills that are out there and you smell all sorts of different meat all around. Ping Sun from
Rice University is on our board, and she was telling a story about she and David were up in New York talking to some Rice grads, and David was touting that Hermann Park was more special than Central Park because you could only barbecue in Central Park maybe 3 days a year, but you can go to Hermann Park any day and see families out there barbecuing.
We did many family birthdays in the 60s and 70s in Hermann Park. I think almost all of us had our birthdays there. It was all my siblings and I.
And where the new grills that we're putting in, they're triples. which,
Oh.
we're trying to do everything we can to facilitate conversation between people,
groups of
from different
people.
backgrounds. And so if you're standing there, each of you at one of these grills,
That's so
perfect
cool.
bonding experience.
You don't think about that kind of planning going into these kind of things, but you guys are planning for how to get people to interact in that space. That's amazing.
And even all the water play, there's so many things that if kids work together, they're going to make the water shoot higher, or
I love that.
Cooperation is really key to the thoughts.
That's so cool.
So I think everybody now that's listening to this, please click off YouTube, get in the car, get on your bike, and go to the park. Why are you listening to us?
Volunteer and barbecue.
Why are you listening to us? Go to the park.
That's right.
We're making this. We
go take a forest bath.
Yeah, like Kyle was saying, go forest bathing. Keep your clothes on.
Okay.
I would say
Keep
that
your clothes on.
Take your shoes off, because that's called grounding.
Right.
And grounding makes you feel good and part of nature. And also, too, it's probably good for your feet.
It is good for your feet.
Get out there, ground yourself. Well, that's in a good way. And enjoy the park. And, don't pollute. And clean up and all that good stuff. And just enjoy the park. Guys, it's 400 acres in the middle of the city. And I'm pretty sure I'm sure we've only explored about 5 acres, and there's so much more out there to enjoy. Obviously, the zoo is right there. We love the zoo. The zoo are our neighbors. And it's just, Hermann Park is one of the jewels of the city. And we're so happy that we are next door neighbors. And I love going back and forth and talking to you guys too on Twitter, because I'm the guy that runs the Twitter account. So I'm always the one that's always mentioning you guys. So I appreciate it so much. And let's cut this one short so people can go to the park. So there we go. Doreen Stoller and Kyle Wolf from Hermann Park Conservancy. Guys, thank you very much. You guys have an amazing job. You work at the park.
Absolutely.
So
we're all lucky here, but you guys get to just walk out in the park whenever you want to. That's beautiful. Guys, go visit Hermann Park. It's free. It's fun. It's right next to the Houston Museum of Natural Science.